So these are assembly instructions for the project that I've called Canada Day Picnic. So I'm starting off with the pieces for the picnic table. So I've got two sets of these pieces, which are two layers of 1.5 millimeter chipboard, which I've stacked up on top of one another and glued together, and then I've painted white. So I've done that twice. And then I have four pieces that look like this, and I'm just folding down on the score lines for these four tabs. So I have four identical pieces, and I'm doing that for all four of them. These pieces are cut out of 80-pound cardstock. I'm taking one of my pieces and putting glue on the underside of it right up to that horizontal piece. Imagine there's a line here and the glue goes below that line and all the way down. So no glue on the four tabs and no glue on this horizontal rectangle, but I'm covering the rest of it in glue. And then I'm taking my chipboard piece and gluing my cardstock piece to my chipboard. So I have my cardstock glued to my chipboard. I'm going to flip my piece over, and then I'm going to take my second piece of cardstock and glue it on top. So I've got my tabs folded away from me this time, and I'm putting glue all over the underside. Again, I'm not putting glue in that top rectangle, and I'm not putting glue on the four tabs, but I'm just covering the rest of it in glue. And then I'm just matching up the edges of my cardstock piece to my chipboard piece. This is the outside of my picnic table, and this is the inside of my picnic table. I've covered both pieces of my chipboard in cardstock. So I have the four tabs here going towards me. I'm going to carefully fold this rectangle towards me, the very top of my chipboard pieces, like so. So that's one of my two sets done. I'm going to assemble the second one the exact same way. So next I have this frame piece that's going to hold the top of my table. I'm just folding down on all the score lines. I have a scored rectangle in the center, and then I have score lines on all four sides. I'm just folding down on all those score lines. So this is the outside of my shape, and this is the inside. So I've got the short sides on the left and the right, and I have the longer sides on the top and the bottom. I'm putting glue from the score line to the end, on that very last segment that's closest to me, and I'm folding it under and laying that piece flat so I have two segments upwards like so. So I'm rotating my piece. So I'm doing the exact same thing on the panels that are across. I'm just putting glue from the score line to the end on the last rectangle. I'm tucking it under, and then I'm folding it flat onto my frame piece. So now I'm doing the same thing on my shorter sides. I'm putting glue from the score line to the end, tucking that piece under. It fits right between those two sides that I've just glued down. I'm rotating my piece again and doing that on the other end, so just across from it. So next I'm putting glue on the corners here. So on the longer sides, just at the end, I'm putting a triangle of glue from the corner just along the edge like so. And then I'm popping up my sides. I'm tucking the corners of my long sides into my short sides. And then I'm holding it together as the glue dries. So I have a whole bunch of long strips, and then I have four little short ones. So I'm going to temporarily fold two of these tabs away, and then I'm putting glue all over the other tabs that are on my right. I'm placing two of those short strips, and I am gluing them down to those tabs. And I want them as straight as possible, so the edges should be nice and even. And then I'm putting glue on those tabs that I folded away, and then I'm just folding them down onto the strips like so. I'm doing the exact same thing on the other side. I'm folding these away, putting glue on the two tabs, and I'm just gluing those tabs in place. I'm rotating it so that I can see better, but I'm just gluing those two strips down. And then I'm putting glue all over those tabs. I'm gluing them down in place, like so. So next I'm taking the other end, and I am temporarily pulling these tabs away. This frame is standing up straight, and this frame is folded away. I'm putting glue on all four of my tabs, and then I'm gluing the other end of those strips to the tabs. I'm putting glue on the four leftover tabs, the ones that I had folded away. And I'm folding them down onto those four strips. So now I'm going to take my frame piece. So So I'm putting glue on both of those rectangles. So these two are at 90 degrees from one another. One of them's folded towards the center of my picnic table and the other one is standing up straight. And then I'm inserting my frame, so I want the mitered corners downwards. The top of this one is even with the top of my frame piece. I'm going to do that on both sides. And they should be even on both edges so that my picnic table is nice and square. And I'm going to flip it over and I'm just gluing in that bottom. All right, so this is the top of my picnic table. So I have some cardstock strips to simulate the wooden slats on the top of my picnic table. So I'm just stacking them up in groups of 3 and gluing all 3 layers together. So now I have my 6 slats that are glued together. So this is 3 layers of cardstock. And I'm putting glue on the underside of each one of them. And then I'm just gluing them to the top of my table. I want the edges to be nice and even. I'm just working my way along my picnic table top, just gluing down the slats one after the other. I'm just putting glue along the short sides of that top frame of my picnic table and just along the outer edges like so. And then I'm taking the top of my picnic table, so I've got that flat side facing downwards. I'm doing my best to center my picnic table on the frame. Maybe easier to flip it over here and just take a look, make sure that it's nice and centered. So next I have the slats that go on the 2 benches. So I've got 2 layers for each of them. So I'm just putting glue on the underside of one of my strips and then gluing it to the other. And I'm doing that with all 4 sets. I have 2 of them for one side and I have 2 of them for the other. So I'm putting glue all over that inner one. I'm trying to center this piece horizontally as much as possible. So if I flip it over, I want approximately the same overhang on both sides. So I'm putting glue on the next one and I'm gluing it down. So the edges here should be nice and even, and I'm just gluing that down. So I'm rotating and I'm doing the exact same thing on the other side. All right, so there's my picnic table. Now I'm going to decorate it for Canada Day. So I have extra slats for the top, and these 6 slats have score lines on them to help me position my maple leaf. So I'm gluing them down in the same position that they are in the file so that those score lines are there to help me center my maple leaf as much as possible. So next I'm putting glue within those score lines and I'm taking my maple leaf, I'm positioning it so that it's within the score lines that are on my slats. And there you have it, ready for the picnic. So next I'm working on my umbrella. For my umbrella I have a craft dowel. The diameter of my craft dowel is a little bit larger than 1/8 of an inch. And I have the 2 pieces for my umbrella. I'm going to start with the top of my umbrella and I'm just folding down on all the score lines. They run across my shape. I'm just working my way around my shape, folding down on all those score lines. It doesn't matter which one, I'm going to bring 2 sides together and then do the same thing on the next side. So basically I want an accordion fold all the way around my shape. So this is a valley, this is a mountain, this is a valley, and I'm just continuing along, alternating the folds. So this is 65-pound cardstock. This is shimmer cardstock that I purchased at Michael's. It's a little bit thick for this purpose. I would recommend a lighter cardstock than 65 pounds, but this definitely will work. So next I have the underside of my umbrella. So I'm folding down on the same score lines as I did for the top part of my umbrella. So now that I've folded down on all of them, I'm going to randomly choose one of my sides. So I have this triangular cutout here. At the peak of this triangular cutout, I have another score line. I want this score line to go downwards, so to be a valley fold. I want everything past the peak to be a mountain fold. So I'm carefully folding it so that this is a valley and this is a mountain. And then I'm going to move to the next triangle and I'm going to do the exact same thing. So the part that comes from the peak is folded downwards, and the part past that cutout is folded as a mountain instead. So I'm just carefully folding down for all of them, just making sure that I'm alternating. So on either side I have mountain folds and I'm folding this downwards, but then above that triangle I'm folding upwards. So now when I push inwards from the exterior, so the center wants to rise upwards, you have that star formation. All these outer layers, they kind of look like hearts. So the center of the heart pops upwards and either side is downwards in a valley fold. So now I'm going to flip it over and just reinforcing those folds on the underside. So I've got the center part rising up like a volcano. I'm going to flip it over and I'm putting glue just along the edges of my hearts. I'm just working my way around my shape, just putting glue on that curved area. And then I'm taking the top of my umbrella and I'm going to flip this piece over and I'm matching up those rounded edges, pinching where all that glue is. So I'm matching up the curves of the underside and the top of my umbrella, and I'm just gluing them in place. So that's the top of my umbrella and that's the bottom. So next I'm using my craft dowel and I am inserting it in the hole that's at the bottom and then poking it through the top. And then I have this piece of cardstock. I'm putting double-sided tape on the underside of the piece of cardstock. And then I'm removing the liner from my double-sided tape. I'm looking at the top of my umbrella. I'm just wrapping that piece of cardstock just around the end. And this is going to be a stopper so that my umbrella knows to stop. I'm doing the same thing with a second piece of cardstock. So I'm opening my umbrella as far as I want it to go. And then I'm positioning my cardstock around the base. And I'm just wrapping it around. So this is the assembly of my round picnic table. So I have the base piece and then I have this piece that goes on top of it. And then I have 3 circles that each have 6 boards to them. I'm matching up the similar shapes and gluing them on top of one another, creating 3 layers to make a nice thick board. And then I'm putting glue on the underside of my stack and just matching it up with that same piece on this piece. So I'm just continuing along with all 6 pieces, stacking them up in 3 layers and then gluing them down to my base piece. So I've got 2 of them done. I'm going to do the exact same thing with the 4 others. So now that I've glued all my layers on top, I've put glue on the underside of it and I'm gluing it down to that full circle. So next I have the leg pieces for my table. So I have 6 leg pieces that look a little bit like boomerangs. I've cut them out of 2mm chipboard and I've painted them with white acrylic paint. So this is just from the dollar store, nothing fancy. Then I have 6 of these pieces that look like the letter X. There are score lines at the top that form tabs. I'm just folding them towards me. And then there's a score line in the center. So I'm folding the shape in on itself like so. And I'm going to do that with all 6 of my X-shaped pieces. So I'm taking 2 of my chipboard pieces and I want them to meet at the middle. I'm taking one of my cardstock pieces, so this is 80-pound Cricut cardstock, and I'm putting glue just below the score line of the tab and all along 1/2 of my shape. And then I'm taking the chipboard piece that's on my left, I'm gluing my cardstock down, and I want the edges to match up. I flip my piece over and putting glue on the other half of my cardstock piece. I'm taking my second piece of chipboard and I'm gluing it, and I'm making sure that the edges of my cardstock are following along the edge of my chipboard. So next I'm going to take another one of my cardstock pieces. I've got my chipboard side facing upwards. I'm gluing the left hand side of my cardstock piece to my chipboard. So I'm putting glue again from the score line all along 1/2 of my cardstock piece. And then I'm laying it down on my chipboard and matching up the edges and the ends. So I'm taking another chipboard piece. I've got my cardstock piece here. I'm covering my cardstock piece in glue. I'm taking my chipboard piece and I'm gluing it to my cardstock and making sure that the edges are nice and even. So I've covered this side of my chipboard with the cardstock piece. Now I'm going to cover the other side of it. I'm putting glue on 1/2 of that cardstock piece except the tab, and then I'm gluing it down to the other side of my chipboard. So basically, I'm just sandwiching my chipboard between 2 layers of cardstock. So I'm just continuing along, doing the exact same thing, gluing down my chipboard onto my cardstock pieces. All right, so now all my chipboard pieces are glued in, and I have 1 cardstock piece left. I'm putting glue on 1/2 of that X-shaped piece and gluing it down to the left-hand side, as I've been doing all along. And then I'm covering the other side of that last piece of cardstock with glue. And then I'm matching up that first chipboard piece that I started with. So then I have a hexagon. My hexagon has rectangular score lines on all 6 sides of it. And this is to help me place my tabs so that they're centered. I've got all those tabs folded so that they're flat, and I'm covering all of them in glue. I've got my hexagon down on my mat, and I'm placing my tabs so that they're as centered as possible within those score lines. And the edges of my chipboard pieces to be right on the edge of my hexagon, like so. So I'm going to flip my piece over and just make sure that my table isn't too wonky. It's pretty good. Better than most picnic tables, I have to say. Then I'm putting glue all over that hexagon. The flat side of my table is facing upwards. I've got my slats running horizontally, so there's a center hole in both layers. I'm positioning them exactly on top of one another, trying to center my hexagon as much as possible. So now I'm just going in there with my bone folder and I'm spreading that glue. So when I flip it over, I have my little picnic table. So now I'm going to assemble my little benches that are going to go around my circular picnic table. And they pretty much go together the same way as the table itself. So I have my base piece, and then I have 3 sets of these planks or these slats. I'm going to start by stacking these up and gluing them together to make a nice thick layer. So all of my slats are now 3 layers. I'm matching my slats up to my base piece, gluing them down, making sure that the edges are nice and even. I'm just gluing down that last piece. So I'm flipping my piece over, so this is the smooth side. I'm putting glue all over it, and then I'm gluing it to that solid circular base. I want the edges to be nice and even. So instead of using chipboard for the legs, I decided to use craft board. You can also use 110-pound cardstock if you don't have any craft board. So these are my craft board pieces, and these are my cardstock pieces. My cardstock pieces all have those tabs at the top. So I'm folding down on the 2 score lines that are at the top to form the tabs, and then folding on that center score line. I'm doing that for all 6 pieces. So I'm taking my craft board pieces. Now they're easy to recognize because they don't have the tabs at the top. This time I'm going to put glue all over the craft board piece. And then I'm going to take one of those X shapes with the tabs at the top. So I'm gluing half of my cardstock piece down to my craft board piece. And I want the bottom and the edges to be nice and even. Here's my craft board piece. I'm putting glue all over that craft board. I'm taking another cardstock piece and I'm matching up the bottoms and the edges. I'm putting glue on the other half of that cardstock piece. Then I'm taking one of my craft board pieces and I'm matching it up. Then I'm putting glue all over the craft board piece, taking another one of my cardstock pieces and gluing down one half of that piece, making sure that the bottom and the edges are nice and even. So I'm going to just continue doing that with all of my 6 pieces. This is a little bit smaller than the table, so it gets a little bit crowded at the end. So I'm down to the last one. I'm just installing that last piece of craft board on my cardstock. So on the left hand side, that's my piece of craft board. On the right hand side, that's my cardstock. I'm putting glue on my craft board piece, and then I'm matching it up with my cardstock as I've been doing all along. And then I'm folding these tabs so that they're flat like so. This part is a little bit different from the table. So for the table, I had a hexagon shape that had rectangular score lines around the edge of it. For the stools, however, it's a circular shape, and it's exactly the same as the circular base that's under the table slats. So those score lines are going to help me position the legs for my stool. Those tabs are laying flat, and I'm putting glue all over them. And I'm positioning my tabs so that the outer edge is right along the outer edge of my circular piece. The edges of my tabs are between those scored rectangles you see on the base. So I'm positioning my tabs so the edges of them are within those scored rectangles. So I'm putting glue on the underside of the seat of my bench, and I'm just gluing it to that circle that I've just glued down. I can go in with my bone folder and just spread all that glue. So there are my 2 little benches in my chair, just waiting for a nice Canada Day picnic.